Our topic is still the review of literature. And in the first workshop on Tuesday, we focused on the research topic, the use of literature, suggestions for using literature in planning different types of studies. We did deal with that. We also looked at the steps in conducting a literature review. We did touch a little bit. We made reference to a literature map, and I rushed to go and open another slide, which we will see today, because we shall have now to deal with the details of the literature map from my perspective. We will look at the priority for selecting literature material, how we deal with the definition of concepts or terms. If time permits, we will touch on comparison and contrasting, because there was a question on comparison and contrasting. I will touch a little bit on this because we did touch on it. I will only want to show an extract from one of the reports, how I did compare or contrast some of the information from literature. Then we'll look at abstracting studies, how we abstract studies, especially when we prepare as part of our literature review. We will look at the criteria for literature and the myth of outdated literature. This last aspect doesn't have to be discussed at length, but I just conducted my own research so that I become comfortable with it, because in most workshops, a question is posed: how old should we accept literatures? Do we only use literatures 1 year old, 3, 4, or 5 or 6? Can I cite a 30-year-old literature? It's always a question, and today I will indicate what my feelings are and what I found from some of the investigations. And the outcomes are still the same, that participants should master the process of literature review. They should be able to apply acquired literature review skills in all stages of the research projects. They should be agile in identifying literature relevant to their studies. They should be able to review and synthesize literature for the research projects that they wish to undertake. And we start with the topic, with the first topic today, which is the a priority for selecting literature material. Where I got this information, they packaged and they make specific recommendation on which type of literature should we prioritize, which ones can we downplay, can we put at the lowest in terms of our priority, which one comes first in our list and which ones come last. It is recommended that you establish a priority in search of a literature. This is a suggestion, guidelines, and also to establish the types of literature that might be reviewed and in what priority. Then there are considerations that are recommended here, and I'm going to start with a broad synthesis. There is a recommendation that it is better to start with looking at the broad synthesis in terms of our literature searches and review. Especially if you are examining a topic for the first time and unaware of the research on it, start with broad synthesis of the literature, such as overviews found in encyclopedias, and some of the overviews might also be found in journal articles or abstract series. Journal articles, always at the beginning, would have an abstract, and there that is where a person can find a broad overview of what the topic is about, what the article is all about. So this is the first recommendation that the guidelines for today are providing to us. Second, the second priority is the journal articles. Next, they say 10 to journal articles in respected national journals especially those that report research studies. And may I request that we mute? We mute. You will only unmute when I open for questions and comments. Please mute. You are disturbing, even if you are attending class. Marina, if you are able, please try to mute them, those that are trying to disturb us. So there is a recommendation here in terms of the journal articles that when we look for those, we need to look at those that are studies that focus on research. And the reason they say so is that these mainly focus on, they provide us with recent information. That is why they say by research, they mean that the author or authors pose a question or a hypothesis, collect data and try to answer the question or a hypothesis. They are journals widely read in most of the fields, and typically they are publications with a high quality editorial board consisting of individuals from abroad or from local. By turning to the first few pages, you can determine if an editorial board is listed and whether it is made up of individuals from around the country or from abroad. If they are it's under an international organization. Start with the most recent issues of the journals and look for studies about your topic and then work backward in time. Follow up on references at the end of the articles for more sources to examine. I am going to show you in the next slides how I have tried to check some of the journal and how a person can verify and validate that this is a peer-reviewed journal, so that this is not a fly-by-night journal which is going to rob us of our information. And I went into the web where I got hold of the South African Journal of Botany, and immediately I was interested on looking at what it provides. And because I was interested mainly on verifying and validating the way in which I can validate if the journal is peer-reviewed, that it is professional, and that it is a scientific journal that complies with the scientific standards. And I went to one of the some of the information here. I found there is something that they refer to as an editorial board. And I clicked there, and fortunately, I saw a list of a lot of people, international and local. There you see, there is the chief editor. You see, there is an editorial assistant. There is an associate editors, a number of them. But here I just sampled one, who is Stephen Amor. He is also a South African, but I have, for the purposes of an example, in this slide, included one of the editors who is an international editor. There is her name, Isabelle Margaret Hulin, from Canada. I intentionally included her to indicate that the Journal of Botany in South Africa in the editorial board includes some international individuals who are part of the editorial board, and therefore this is a well peer-reviewed journal. So the articles are subjected to a peer reviewing process. What I did again is to go inside the web again under this journal to go and find detailed information, and I found they say something about peer review, and that is where I made this extract which you see here on this slide. And if I can just read some few statements here, it says peer review. It says this journal operates a single anonymized review process. All contributions will be initially assessed by the editor for a suitability for the journal. Papers deemed suitable are then typically sent to a minimum of 2 independent expert reviewers to assess the scientific quality of the paper. So it means here they are confirming that this is the service that they provide. And in terms, I was also asking myself, what about if they just include these statements for purposes of lying to us? But do you think they can go at length and write? This is a very long. This web has got a lot of information and very long. It also includes guideline to those who are potential publishers. And they even tell you when to publish, how much you will pay, and how long it will take. And it is a full web that has got all information in order to accommodate its clients, the potential publishers, and all the editorial staff. And here, this is also part and part of ensuring that we validate that the articles are scientific. Now, here they talk about referees again. A highly qualified editorial board, they are repeating it, in collaboration with dedicated referees, ensure peer reviewing of all manuscript and maintenance of international scientific standards. So this is what I'm after, and I wanted you to hear, because there they said, they warn that we must not just use any type of a journal, because there are journals that are not peer reviewed, that do not comply with the scientific standards. Therefore, they're not good and they're not suitable, they're not credible, they are not good to cite and to refer them when we compile, we work through our literature review. So this is just an example of one of the journal, and it is not up to the study leader, and it is not up to me to tell you which ones are accredited or not. You must just on your own establish and validate that the sources from where I get information are validated, are valid, and they are indeed scientific. That is the role of the researcher. And we can even go further. Journals that report research studies, then this is where I want to indicate how you can quickly peruse and quickly establish if the journal can support you and if the journal is of good worth. And that is where earlier on they said it is recommended that we use journal that report studies. No, so I've just taken this sample. It's also one of the the articles from the journal that we're looking at. And here, the topic is product development with Cissus quadrangulaire to create awareness among your adults. So this is an indigenous plant. It grows in South Africa. So the researcher was investigating to find if this can be used for food and if they can market it in their own way. Now, I wanted to see if they indeed have conducted research. Then I went to the heading. This heading did not tell me anything. So because of that, I went further to the abstract to establish if they make mention of any experiment or any type of research that they undertake, because this is natural science where most of the research is undertaken through experiments, particularly if they were to develop a food product from this natural plant, they had to test. And that is the reason why you see in the middle of this slide, in the middle of the paragraph, you see 3 statements there. That is where I wanted to indicate to you there that there is evidence. And this is the evidence that can be browsed. This is the abstract that one can browse quickly to identify and establish if there is indeed anything that has to do with research. And in red, the first red statement says, testing is part of the experiment in research. In other words, there is a statement that made reference to testing of the plant, Cissus quadrangulaire, to test if the product can be used in the development of food product. The developed food items were tested. That is what I wanted to indicate to you. And my red is referring to that tested. Again, the next red insertion there makes reference to analysis. Analysis, we know that everything that is analysis have been researched. And in research, analysis is one of the stages in a research process. After you have collected your data, then you analyze. So it tells us that somebody had collected data or somebody was conducting research. But apart from that, there is the last statement where which also emphasizes that there is the document that we're looking at is indeed of a research type. And there is a statement about samples, and samples are for research indeed, because this is a part of the population that we sample in order to conduct our experiment. So I could, if I was not convinced through the heading, quickly browse through the abstract, and I will be able to establish that this is indeed an article. This actually assists me not to waste time to read the entire article, because if you read the entire article, then it takes time and you don't have enough time to spend and to waste. You want to do your literature review fast so that you can finish your task fast. But if indeed the abstract is doubtful, you don't believe in it, the body of the article always has a section where it talks about methods and materials. In science, here that is where you would hear about the experiments, you would hear about the methodology, the equipment, the apparatus, and the process, the procedure that was followed in conducting the research. So it was there, and we noted that it also made reference to the species, plant species that is under investigation, and it has been referred to from the topic and in the abstract. So it was not even necessary for me to go to the research and methods, but I just wanted to show that there are a number of ways that one can establish if this is a worthwhile and a useful article that one can use as part of literature review. When we have okay, apart from the journals, we can also look at the books. Books are put as third, and they follow the journals because they are also relevant. But then they are considered inferior in terms of these guidelines to journals, because books are not necessarily going to report recent things. You cannot publish a book every year, but you can publish an article every year. There's an article that has been published in this journal in 2024, and in this journal does also have articles that were published in 2023. So it consolidated all of those. So that is the benefit of using journals. But in books, a book would be 2019, 2023, but this year you won't find a similar book. You would find a different one and from a different author. But you can turn to books related to the topic. You can begin by researching monographs that summarize literature. Then you can consider entire books on single topic by a single author or group of authors, or books that contain chapters written by different authors. There are books that are edited, books in specific disciplines. If you are an environmentalist, and books are about botany, they can talk about the ecology of Cissus quadrangulae. The other one can talk about the adaptation of Cissus quadrangulae. The other one can establish the distribution. So in different topics or in different chapters. So edited books can provide that. But otherwise, there is a book that treats a specific topic. Then it would have different chapters and different sections. So the choice then is dependent on the researcher, what he does. But all these are available and at your exposure. Then you can look at those. Next, apart from books, there are conference papers that follow this search by looking for recent conference papers. Look for major national conferences and the papers delivered at them. I've noted that from the South African Journal of Botany, they advertise a conference. I think they've advertised a conference for this year already. And when they do so, they actually even focus the conference. When they are advertising, they will tell you the focus of the conference this year, so that when you prepare your articles and you want to contribute, you know that the topics must be aligned with the year, the theme of the year, and the theme of the conference. So conference papers are important, and these are more closely related to journals, because you might find that these conferences are either there biannually or they are there annually. I don't know. Then it depends on the organization and the clients and the stakeholders to the organizing committee when this should be organized. but they are very topical, and they can address recent and contemporary research is always available. And you find conference papers in an edited bundle in one book that has been bound together with a number of papers in them. And then they will be treating different subtopics under the theme of that very conference. Okay. Often conference papers report the latest research developments. I've said that most major conferences either require a request that authors submit their papers for inclusion in computerized indices. This is how they will require in most cases. And as I've said, in terms of the South African Journal of Botany, they contain guidelines on how you need to include, how you do your abstract, what is the table of content, and how you should do your experiments and everything. They will guide you and specify how do you comply with ethics, what are those important things that you need to disclose, how are the payments done, how is the peer reviewing done, as we were talking about it earlier on. So this is what the conference organizers will do for you. Then they prepare you so that you can deliver quality papers, because they also have an editorial board. Then make contact with authors of pertinent studies if you know them. And because you belong to a research community, of course, around you, you are surrounded by the people who are in the same discipline as yourself. This includes the study leader, and this includes the department and the college under which you are registered. Then you can seek them out at conferences. This is just a suggestion. Write or phone them. This is when you've got their contact, or you're hunting them and you want assistance, or you want to bounce idea and have communication with them about how you can access the relevant resource material, or how you can contribute to the body of knowledge if you want to publish, or if you want, when your job, your research report is completed, sometimes the university would require that you publish either 1 or 2 research papers as a requirement for your graduation. And the next is the dissertations. If time permits, they say you can also scan the entire dissertation abstracts. I've also made reference to the abstract when I started. So dissertations also have abstracts, which are easy to use tools, because you cannot go through the entire dissertation. Dissertations are very long. A master's dissertation from 90 pages, 150, 200, 250 to 300, you see, depending on the discipline and the topic under investigation. So if you go through the abstract, you quickly establish if this is relevant or is not relevant. Then you can decide whether to go in and look at. Then if you see that it is relevant, the other way of doing, of following what you want to use from the report, you go to the table of contents there. You can find there are specific chapters and specific sections, and those sections have got paragraphs. This is how you peruse and you go through that. And I think the majority of you have got experience in this, but I'm just saying it for the purpose of facilitating, so that I also tease you that you can think broadly. A search of the abstracts might result in 1 or 2 relevant dissertations, and you can request copies of them through interlibrary loans or through the university. And apart from the dissertations, then you've got web. This is online information, and you've got search engines. And outside search engines, you've got the ordinary Google. Oh, but Google Scholar is a search engine, maybe. But there is this ordinary Google where you go in there. Maybe we need to make reference to that mainly. The web also provides helpful materials for a literature review. The essay, the easy access and ability to capture entire articles makes this source of material attractive. Even if you don't have a specific search engine and you just go to the ordinary Google, there's a possibility that you can get some of the journals, some of the articles. Remember, the journal that I got, it was just through the ordinary Google, and it was entitled Open Access journal. So in other words, the articles that are there are packaged as open access. That is why there is no restriction in accessing them. You don't access them through specific search engines. So it was easy for me to get all of them, but they're very useful. I'm interested on botany because that is where I started to work, and I found the information very interesting. That is why I abstracted information about Caesar's quadrangle, because I'm familiar with it. So the web is an important tool, and it provides us with good sites. However, you need to screen these articles carefully for quality and to be cautious about whether they are representative, collaborative, rigorous, thoughtful, and systematic search suitable for use in literature review. And if you remember, in the first workshop, we were talking about science and scientific research. We said anything that should be considered, anything will not be considered scientific unless it shows an element of collaboration, and unless it has gone through rigorous process, unless it demonstrate that there is deep thought in it. That is why we see thoughtful here, and that it shows that the process of acquiring the information has been systematic. So if all these 4 aspects are accommodated in those in the literature that we are actually identifying from the web, then we can be assured that this literature actually complies with the scientific standards, and we would be safe to use that. But if we find that they lack, then they don't show elements of collaborativeness or collaboration, rigor, and thoughtfulness or systematic type of it, then one should be dubious and should not just jump onto the information and use it as scientific. Online journals, on the other hand, often include articles that have undergone rigorous reviews by editorial boards. And I've demonstrated this at the beginning when I presented the journal as an example, the Journal of Botany, the South African Journal of Botany. And that was just a demonstration that even online, the ordinary Google can provide you with important journals that have undergone reviews. And I did touch on peer review, and yes, I think I made reference to that to show that these are valid articles. Now, you might check to see if the journal has a refereed editorial board that reviews manuscripts and has published standards for accepting manuscripts in an editorial board. This I have established in terms of the journal, the South African Journal of Botany. And then it is recommended that all of us actually do establish this. This is an overemphasis, so that it also indeed helps us when we do our literature review. Information from the web mainly, and why? What is the advantage that the web has over other sources of information? You know, even if you're not going through specific search engines, from the web, you will always get information that is recent. If you search, even if there is information that is old, the likelihood when you search, there's no way that you won't find recent information, because the journal that I got has got articles dated 2024 and articles dated 2023. So it is a recent one. So it was received and approved, then published this year. Information that is not likely to be published, such as media statements, press release, or political speeches, because these are very, very important in some of the research. Political speeches, very, very important in political science. Media statements, very, very important in terms of the recent developments in a lot of disciplines. Some of the policy statements are made verbally by politicians, and some of the media statements are made in terms of the policies that govern specific disciplines internationally or in South Africa. So that is where one can become aware of the recent information that one should be able to use. So this is an advantage of using the web, which is not there in other in other sources of the literature. Information produced by government agencies, including policy documents, white and green papers, new strategic initiatives, and budget overviews. This policy document, legislation, all of them, you can find them from the web. And this is not always available even from specific search engines, because if search engines would publish specific journals or journals related to specific disciplines. So a green paper does not belong to a specific discipline because it belongs to government. So, and I don't think that it can be published in a specific journal. So this is the information that you can get, and you've got an advantage if you are searching your literature through the web. Information that is produced regularly but not regarded as worthy of publication in scientific publications such as annual reports, financial statements, mission statements, and technical reviews. And these are very, very important documents. You would see when you write a background to your studies, especially when you're doing your proposal or when you are finalizing your chapter 1, things like reports, mission statements, policies, annual reports, things that cannot even be published in scientific journals as articles. You are able to find them from the web. So this is an advantage that we have. And I was indicating why the importance of the information from the web. And I think we have finalized that. Maybe the system was forcing me to pause. But let me summarize before I pause. In summary, referred journal articles are placed high on the list because they are the easiest to locate and to duplicate. They also report research about a topic, and they are about recent findings. Dissertations are listed lower in priority because they vary considerably in quality and are the most difficult reading material to locate and reproduce. Caution should be used in choosing journal articles on the web, unless they are part of the revered online journals, as we've been talking about. Thank you very much. I want to pause here before we come to the next section, and I want to give you an opportunity if you've got questions to pose or you have got comments to make. Colleagues, does any one of you want to say something about a literature map even before we can start? I think you might have gone back to go and read, and you might have grasped a little something last, or if somebody wants to say something just before we could start now.
I think a literature map will be some sort of a guideline from what I have researched to what is it that I want to achieve. So basically, my thinking is I get what I've researched on, so basically get the data that I need from all the sources that I need, and then analyze my data, and then from there, be able to plan on how am I going to ensure that my data speaks the same language that I want at the end of my my research. So which will be the conclusion part of it. That's my 2 cent input, even though I was not in last week.
Okay, and thank you very much. Thank you for that contribution. And I want to continue. You are allowed, Stanford, do come in when I pause, when I shall have presented this, and we can continue to discuss and see how we all understand it. And then I'll be happy. And I'm so happy that you have said something here before I could start. And there's nothing wrong in saying a view that is the same as mine, or that is different, or that supports, or any other way, as long as it is a view. One of the first tasks for a researcher working with a new topic is to organize the literature. And as mentioned earlier on Tuesday, this organization enables a person to understand how the proposed study adds to or extends or replicates research already completed. Colleagues, we have debated a lot about why we do literature research when in our studies. And we did also indicate that literature research will assist us in knowing where to focus so that what we do, our studies should always contribute to the body of knowledge. It does not have necessary, it doesn't have to replicate, doesn't necessarily have to replicate, but when it replicates, what is it that it is bringing? If it is replicating a study, what is new in that replication? If there's nothing new, to me, there's no need to replicate. But studies can also be extended. And we said some previous studies might make specific recommendations that further research on this topic should focus on 1, 2, 3, 4, because the previous researcher could not finalize the research, the topic, or because of other reasons such as lack of resources, which is in either time or money to finalize the topic in every aspect. So this leaves a gap that justifies someone to undertake research. So this can only be found through literature review. So this is an important aspect why we undertake literature review. A useful approach to this step is to design a literature map. This is an idea that was developed several years ago, and it has been a useful tool for students to use when organizing their literature review of the literature, for making presentations to graduate committees. Yes, just an example. Summarizing the literature for a scholarly presentation, also another example, or composing an article for journal publication. So we've got 3 examples where we can use a literature map. This map is a visual summary. Now they're starting to define. It is in terms of this literature that I've consulted. This map is a visual summary of the research that has been conducted by others. And it is typically represented in a figure. Maps are organized in different ways. That is a literature maps. One could be a hierarchical structure with a top-down presentation of the literature, ending at the bottom with the proposed study. The second one might be similar to a flow chart in which the reader understands the literature as unfolding from the left to the right, with the furthest right-hand section advancing a proposed study. In other words, at the end of the flow chart, the proposed study is presented there. But in the first one, which is hierarchical, the proposed study is at the bottom. But all of these mean the same thing. So it depends on the preference of the researcher or the person undertaking literature review. A third model might be a series of circles. Each circle represents a body of literature, and the intersections of the circles as the place in which the future research is indicated. All these examples are effective. Then the choice is for the researcher himself. The central idea is that the researcher begins to build a visual picture of existing research about a topic. In other words, there's going to be a diagram that is going to be presented or to be drawn, and then it will show, there will be words there later on. I will show you how I've done it. And I think I did present something last week. I will repeat again. I've made an improvement on that one so that I can show how we can differently use the approach that I have adopted. And this literature map presents an overview of existing literature. The map illustrates a hierarchical design, and the author uses several principles of good map design. And there is no single way of doing a literature map. No, we have just to be creative. As long as we are playing around with the literature that we have studied, and as long as it makes sense to us, and it will eventually assist us and contribute to the research that we want to undertake. Composing a literature map can be challenging. For an example, individuals seeing this map may not be familiar with the approach to organizing the literature and making a case for the study that the researcher is trying to undertake. So we are saying people who are outside the study and who are not myself, who is doing the literature map, would not understand. Maybe in other words, they are proposing here, there is an explanation which would be required. They need to be told the intent of such a map. Yes, indeed, I agree. It takes time to develop such a map and locate literature to put into the map. For a preliminary map, there is a suggestion that the researchers or the person drawing this map considers to review at least 25 studies for a preliminary map. But as he continues and he finalizes the map, then it is recommended that the researcher moves up to 100 studies, especially if he does it for the dissertation or a thesis. So you can see this is a lot. And how do we represent all 100 literature in the map? So it means we will have to summarize. And this is what I will try to illustrate in the next slides, how a literature map can summarize things. And you will see we'll have different themes and topics. Figuring out how your study as to the literature takes more time. It may add to several threads in your literature map. For practical purposes, it might not work. To tying it all of your subdivisions, select one or two subdivisions. Yes, here they're saying that if you've got you are doing a literature map, you might find that there is a lot of information, and that lot of information can result into a very big literature map. Sometimes it would not fit in one page or in one slide. So maybe you can go and identify one section or one leg of the literature map from the diagram and concentrate on that as for point of demonstration. And for purposes of illustration, I've simplified the literature map, although I think it is complex in terms of the lines that are cross-cutting and connecting the different dots that I have here. Then we'll talk and we'll discuss and see how simple it could be made, and so that in our area we can also use it to simplify our approach in doing the map. It is also challenging to figure out what the broad topic might be for the top of the map. And what you will see here in the map, I will also emphasize it again, is that you will have two topics. You will have a broader topic that you will put above the literature map for purposes of demonstrating on a paper or writing. And that one will capture all the literature that has been reviewed in the topic. But as you go down and you narrow it down, you must reach at your topic by trying to narrow it down and trying to be specific to something that is researchable, as directed by the literature map and based on your findings in terms of the different thematic areas that are addressed in your literature review. So that needs to point to the literature study, or needs to support you in the in the study that you want to conduct. So in other words, there would be literature that is very generic and the literature that is going to be specific to your studies. So the literature that is very broad mainly belong to the broader and to the very first topic on top of the map, but the literature that is specific to the research topic or to the research area where you are interested is at the bottom, because that is where you are directed, and it is something that is zooming into what you want to look at. We'll look at that and make reference to this if there is a need to discuss that. The top map, the topic above is the topic to which your literature map adds. Oh, okay, I've already said that. Ask others who know about your literature and continually ask yourself what body of literature your study will contribute to. You see, that literature that you have read, the literature that was produced by previous authors, is what you're going to add it to, because that is existing. But adding into the body of knowledge is you adding into the existence. You're going to have new findings that you will bring into the body of knowledge. Then you extend the body of knowledge, and that belongs to the broader topic that you are talking about and the one that we are putting on top of the literature map. You may also have to develop several versions of your map before it comes together. You see, I have done this. And it is quite interesting because literature will already be there. The only thing that you do is to group and try to identify generic terms or important terms or themes that can be represented in the map. And they are in a way of hierarchy or in a flow chart. If you are interested in a flow chart, and they will always, those that are generic and those that are very specific, and you organize them conceptually, logically, from the broader to the specific. And develop your map, write the discussion, and check it out with others. And here is the example that I have. And when I finish presenting this slide, I will pause so we can discuss it, and we can discuss the discussion that I said in terms of the previous slides, so that we can understand if this representation makes sense, or we can also continue to make further sense using this very slide. And I've got other two that are also related to it, so we can go forth and backwards on them to see if they still make sense. And if I can just touch on this slide, look, the topic that we were talking about at the top, the one that I have here, the relationship between the vendor culture and the environment. And at the bottom, I have something that has to be investigated, to be researched, is the role of vendor culture in nature conservation. So it must be something that has not been investigated. So in other words, when I read my literature, I must find that this topic does not appear, the other one at the bottom. But the other one, which is very broad there on top, it includes a lot of research topics that might have been subtopics that might have been researched. So mine should also become a sub of that top one, but it must not just repeat others for the sake of repeating. It can add into the body of knowledge, it can extend, it can replicate, it can support, or it can be in contradiction in the way that I like to do. You remember on Tuesday we said there are a number of ways in which we can use literature review. So to criticize, or to analyze, or to find the central theme, all those things. So it's the opportunity to use that. Now, under the very big topic there, I've got six blocks. You can see they've got different colors. And I think I showed you this last week. But last week, unfortunately, we only had 30-something people, 36 or so. But today I see that we're 100. So maybe it is new to most of us. But you who were here and who were with me, you will remember this. And I want to tell you that I want to improve on that, because I noted that in some, I did not put references. And if I can just repeat what I said that time for the purposes of those who were not here, is that each of the block show a specific area where research was done. And I just said, my topic was on the role of vendor culture in nature conservation. And all the boxes that are there in the first row, there's no one box that spoke about the role of vendor culture in nature conservation. For an example, the very first box that is in gray by Davenport, which is about history. I'm saying this was a history book. This was a book in which the author Davenport was writing about the history of the Bavenda in 1981. And fortunately, when he was writing about the history of the Bavenda, he said something about water conservation. He said something about the relationship between the Bavenda culture and the water resources. So, because the Bavenda culture, the people have inhabited an area where there is water resources, and they use these water resources. So they've got taboos that are related to water. They follow specific rituals when they use water. So Davenport wrote something like that. So he was not writing about the conservation of water resources, which would be part and parcel of what I want to actually to investigate. So the same applies to, sorry, apart from him saying something about water, Davenport has also said something about land conservation. And he was writing a history book, but he said, these Bavenda people, that stay in the Vhembe district or in the Limpopo, hey, they also have something to do with the land. They either protect it, or they stay in it, or they use it. Because land, that is where we will find soil, we want plant, we find plants, we find water and everything. So he said something about land. He also said something about animals. Huh? You see, that is where all the arrows are going from Devonport. But there is a second author here, who was Matiba. He wrote a master's dissertation, and he graduated from the University of Limpopo, I think, in 1985. And I will show you his literature towards the end of the presentation. And there he presented a thesis, a dissertation in history, and then he makes reference to water resources and the Vavenda. Sorry, my apologies. So he makes reference, this Matiba makes reference to water resources. He makes reference to land conservation, to land and the land protection or land conservation. But he was not talking about the conservation of conservation, his topic. You will see his topic there. I've written it there as part of the reference. And there was another author who was tourism, who was VDC, who wrote about tourism. And there he made reference to the fountains in Venda. Then he speaks about the Chipisa fountain, which has snakes in it, that it should not be disturbed. Otherwise, the snakes will die. And if they die, the fountain will dry. So this person was talking about tourism aspects, but he made reference to the fountains. So you can see that he was not writing about conservation of the. He was not talking about nature conservation. I think I've disturbed this this map. Oh, there it is. I actually have brought another one. I want to stay here. I will still go to those other tools. Now you see, and then but Mabogo there, he was a recent author. This one wrote specifically about plants and ethnobotany, the uses of plants by the Venda, and he was a lecturer at the University of Venda from the Department of Botany. Then he was the one who then spoke specifically in recent language, in conventional language. So he is amongst those that has spoken directly about something that has to do with conservation. But he only spoke about plants. But I'm interested on nature conservation. Plants is part of nature conservation, but it's not inclusive of everything. And then further on, there is this Van der Waal. He was a professor of zoology at the University of Venda. In 1997, he wrote about the conservation of plant species. He wrote about the conservation of land. He wrote about the conservation of water. He wrote about the conservation of animals. Again, I found him in 1984. Is this 1984? I think it's 1994. It's an error. We will check. We'll verify. But he again at one of the conferences presented something in terms of the insects that the Bavenda eat, and those insects are animals. Then, in other words, he made reference to animals in that conference. You see, as a result, everything that happened, although it was not specific on nature conservation, you see, the people that were specific in nature conservation was Mabogo and Van der Waal, because they wrote from a conventional point of view. All of the two were from the University of Venda, so they were writing from a Western perspective. But look, the VGC and Matiba as well as Devonport were writing from the Venda perspective in the cultural point of view, but they contributed to what can be used now in my literature review. I did review, and eventually you will see later on, I will show you, I ended up at having four sub problems. The first one was the conservation of water resources, the role of Venda culture in the conservation of water resources, cultural conservation of land, the Venda culture, cultural conservation of plants, Venda culture, and cultural conservation of animals, indigenous animals, the Venda culture. Then all of these formed the the sub-problems or research objectives of this area where I said has to be investigated. And that is how I eventually had specific sections on conservation of water resources, land conservation, conservation of plants, and conservation of conservation within the context of the Venda culture. And my literature research chapter has got all those 4, and it has addressed that. And when I finalized this study, unfortunately, I added the 5th sub-objective that emerged during the process of the study. But even before I could stop, colleagues, I want to show you that I said you don't have to present your map representing all the legs and everything that your literature review implies. You can choose. Look, I've indicated here. I can, as for an example, not focus on the conservation of the on the role of Venda culture on nature conservation, but I can say I want to concentrate only on biodiversity, on living things, animals and plants in Venda, and I want to investigate them from the perspective of the Venda culture. And I said I can change my topic and say the role of Venda culture, Venda culture in conservation of biodiversity. Then I will only concentrate on the living aspects, which are animals and plants. Otherwise, I can also decide not to focus on the living things. Then I can concentrate on the biophysical environment. In other words, it will be land, which is a combination of the living and the dead, because soil is not alive. But we know that underneath there are animals that stay under the ground, and there are animals that stay in water, although water itself is a physical body that is not alive. And this is how, colleagues, I thought I could do a map, a literature review map. At the time when I completed and prepared my literature review, I did not do these maps. I don't know how, but I did not read anything about doing a literature map. Nobody advised me, whether it's study leader or a colleague or my peers with who we were working. So I did not know anything. I only knew about it when I had to prepare for UNISA workshop. So, and I found it is a useful tool that all of us can benefit from. And let me now pause again so that I can allow for comments and for questions before we can proceed.
Thank you, Dr. Karombe. We have got a question on the chat function. It comes from Talita Nkuane. She says, I have a question about to properly interpret data from a journal or article without changing the information.
Oh, luckily, yesterday, luckily I read something. I was browsing. I was trying to search for statements that can support me to understand contrasting and comparing information. Then another author says, a better way of writing your literature is to write as if you are writing a story. Don't open that book. No, if you have read it, put it away there. Do not copy the statements there. If you read a book and put it away there and you have closed it, try to write it from your head. You will find that you have not copied that. You are going to use your own English. Whether your English is from Chivenda perspective, whether it's from Tswana or Zulu, Xhosa, Afrikaans English perspective, it will not be that person, because that person might have been a German or a Dutch. A Dutch does not know the English from the Dutch people or from the German people. It's not the same as that one spoken in England, in Britain. It's different. It's not the same as the one that we speak in South Africa. It's different. So if the person has written an article, you will find that what you have written is exactly yourself and yours in your own language, the South African language. And I think that will make you not repeat it or restate or paraphrase it. Or plagiarize it. You're talking about plagiarism, is that correct? You must remember, if you have got 2 articles that are supporting the same statements, which one do you want to choose to represent your statement? If I'm talking about a literature map, and I say a literature map is a diagrammic representation of the contents of the literature that was said by Dr. Kutsie. And Dr. Korombi has said a literature map represents literature that you have read in order to complete your studies. So it is two different statements, but they mean the same. But do you think you don't have your own way of saying what those people have said? Close their books and put them away and try and write what they were telling you. And in that way, you will see that you will never copy them.
Thank you, Doctor. I wanted to just clarify my question a little bit. I tend to struggle with putting my words into a way that I keep the point of the journal or the article so that I can prove the point or my topic in a way that kind of makes sense without losing the point. Like, yeah, that's what I wanted to clarify.
Okay. I think I will not exhaust it here, but let me try. Let me try another statement again. You know what I've noted is that I have got a number of ways of writing things. And every day when I wake up, today the way I write my English or I express myself is either bad or worse than yesterday. And what I used to do is that when I've written statements, I rewrite it again and again. And until I find the better way, that is better. So I think practice might make it perfect. But I would like to also try and do research so that I can better present it or clarify it to you. But this is all that I can say at this stage. But we can handle it outside. I can do more research and then we can see how to do it. And I know that there are people that are specializing on academic writing at the center. Sunnyside does have them, and Marina would even advise they specialize on that one. Yeah, I'm not a specialist on that, but I have to write because if I'm writing a report, I have to use English and I actually use other sources in literature. So there is a way in which I've practiced doing it. And this is what is helping me to explain it now.
Very interesting aspect. Seeing for the first time, I must admit, the literature map. What I wanted to establish or find out, Dr. Korombi, is these parameters that we have used in these examples, were they part of your initial search, or they emerged from your search, you extrapolated them from the results that you got when you perform your search? That's what I wanted to establish.
I did put a disclaimer when I started that I did not do a literature map. But you know how I did this literature map? I went to the literature section to go and find out the statements about by these authors. But there is a statement. No, it's not part of this literature map. No, bulk of it, and I think a lot of it comes from the original literature review, not after I've collected data. No, it is from the literature section, which I entitled literature review. It's mainly from there. You know what? When I finish the presentation, I don't know if time will allow. I see that we're left with 45 minutes or even for less than 45 to concluding the presentation. And I still have a lot. I don't think I will finish today. Because why I'm saying so is that some of this literature I do have in another section that is part of this presentation. And there I could see some of the statements there. And I noted that is why I was justifying that I did not get enough literature and I struggled to get literature. That is why lots of literature is about history, about education, about tourism, and only botany, ethnobotany, and maybe sacred shrines to an extent were related. But there is the majority of the literature was from history, from cultural studies, you know, and but I forced it to give me something that I can document. And I still remember my supervisor saying, oh, it's quite an interesting thing because I'm writing from nothing. So in other words, the studies might have broken new grounds, because by the time it was 1997, by the time I conducted the study, not a lot was studied about Venda and nature conservation. But now, when you look into some of the articles, there are some that talk about the sacred areas. There are some that talk about the water resources. Some are talking about animals. Some are still talking about the plants. So you see, because we've got people that are now educated that are also getting interested or on venturing into the research area. No, we have got conventional research process venturing into actually documenting some things that were oral, part of the oral tradition. Now we have it documented, and it is one way in which we can protect and preserve the culture and yes, and the lives of the indigenous communities. So it was quite interesting. But I can say that most of the literature came from the literature section. It was not after data was collected. Any other question? But do you see that? None for now. Okay. But colleagues, before we move from these slides into another topic, but do you see that I've got different versions? I can have different topics. Here I've made 3. But remember, I can have a topic that can focus on the conservation of sacred shrines in the Vhembe district, because that is where the Venda culture is dominant. I can specialize on that. I can also go back, instead of focusing on ethnobotany, as Mabogo said, I can focus on a specific plant and make research on that, do a survey, or find its survival strategies from an ecological point of view. You see, I think I'm just indicating that there are a number of ways where you can present your own literature map and where you can use it. That is why, if you have got a view, don't shy away from it. Please, you can develop it until you find that it makes sense, in a way that you can present it to other people so they can understand what you are doing. So don't shy away, because this is just an example what I'm having here. I would have written it otherwise, put it upside down or sideways, or starting with the bottom one or starting with the other one on the side. You see, it depends on where I want to start.
I just need some clarity on the plagiarism part, where you said something about when 2 authors wrote the same thing, but then in different ways. So you said something about like you need to decide on which one you're gonna use. Then you said something about you close the books, then you actually just write it as your own. Won't that now be seen as plagiarism?
It's not plagiarism. Did you hear what I said? I said, if Dr. Kutsia has written a statement in her own way, and Dr. Korombe has written a statement in his own way, you will never repeat us. If you close those books and put them away there, you will never repeat us. But you will repeat a fact, not the statement as verbatim. You see, the problem with plagiarism, people reproduce the works of others, and you're not going to put it in inverted commas. You will say it as if it is your own words. And that is plagiarism, because you're using the exact words that were used by the previous author. That is what we're trying to do. You know what? Well, in 2019, I was completing another studies under the Department of Public Administration in Northwest. And I had, I plagiarized the whole thesis, and I was supported by the study leader, who advised me on how to revise that one. And otherwise, it was going to be short and to be rejected. I was not going to succeed. I would not qualify. So I noted how important it is not to reproduce statements produced by other authors, because that is what we mean by plagiarism. So, but if you are not reproducing them, there's no way that you will be said that you have plagiarized. You are writing in your own words. If you are Zulu, you are writing the Zulu English. So a German English will never write in Zulu English, because here I will tell you, if I give you my thesis, when you read, you will see that no, a person who has written, especially if you are from my culture, when you read what I've written, you can feel a sense that this guy might belong to the Limpopo, this guy might belong to the Venda culture. You see? So the writing would never be the same. Even if I am from the same village with you, we will never write the same, because you understand you have got your own worldview, your own background, your own experience, your own competency in terms of language and in terms of understanding the concepts. That is what should assist you in actually putting correct statements together rather than repeating somebody's statements.
So yeah, I'm trying to just now, okay, so in essence, what Doc is saying is that, okay, if I paraphrase two ideas from different authors, it won't be seen as plagiarism.
I just said that if you are paraphrasing 4 statements that have been mentioned by 4 professors, do you think there is a way that you can copy them verbatim as they are in one sentence? No, it's not possible. And this is the reason why you need to paraphrase. You need to use your own words. Say it in your own words, but you are stating a fact. They have said, they supported the fact differently. So you want to say it in your words. You are also saying it differently because you are a researcher. Maybe you're also going to say it even much better than any of them. So I think you need to also be given credit if you do that. But if you then use one of the sentences from them, thinking that people will think that it is a fact that was mentioned by all of them, then you are copying and you are plagiarizing. Then there you must be called to order, and you are not professional and you are not scientific. So there is given there again.
Thanks, Dr. Korombi. I think I'm more around if you have 4 professors that have written 4 things that you like to incorporate into your literature review, and you are using you are just using those ideas that they have put together, but as you say, using the different context in terms of how you've been raised and the language. How do you then reference those 4 professors at the same time, even though they you have not copied any of perhaps their words?
I will say, as stated by Professor Masha, Kutie, Korombi, and Mamkhala, 2 donkeys that are pulling a cart pull it faster than when it is pulled by 1 donkey. You see?
Can literature be based on themes without addressing the research gap? And then, Doc, please don't forget to return to contrast and comparison.
Comparison. The definition of terms. Does anyone want to introduce this concept? I give you an opportunity so that we can move together.
Yes.
And we don't have to take time. Please just say something on it, because I know you have been defining terms for years and years. Please say something and contribute to the discussion. Anyone who wants to say an introductory statement or something that is related to the definition of terms or definition of concepts? And if there's no one who wants to say something, let me start now. You see, in literature review, that is where you come across new terms or new concepts, or concepts or terms that are familiar to you because you belong to the discipline. But not everybody who is not part of the discipline does understand them. And the reason for us to define them, these concepts or these terms, is to ensure that the readers to who we are writing this literature do understand what we are talking. Because when we are writing, we are actually communicating to the second and the third person. We are not writing to ourselves, although we want to get a qualification, a doctoral qualification, master's qualification, honors, or postgraduate diploma. But somebody should read, and we're communicating this message. So they must understand. Then when there are terms that are foreign to them, that is the need for us to actually define them. And it is important to know which ones they would not understand and which ones are important to define. A definition of terms, as a result, a definition of terms section or the definition of concept section may be found separate from the literature review. That is number one. Number two, it can be included as part of the literature review, or it can be placed in different sections of a proposal. So we are advised to define terms that individuals outside the field of the study may not understand and to go beyond common language. You see, this is the reason for definition, and I've said it when I started. Please wait. Clearly, whether a term should be defined is a matter of judgment, but define a term if there is any likelihood that readers will not know its meaning. And I think people who are writing, because you belong to the discipline, colleagues, you know what is only familiar to you as the community of practice within your discipline. You are not like us. If you are a statistician, I don't understand what a mean is, what all those median and regression cost curve, all those things are known by you. Please do define them for us so that we can understand, we can move with you. And when we read your document, we would be able to make sense of it because you really want us to use it. It should not only be used by people within you, the same discipline only. Therefore, definition is important. Also, define terms when they first appear so that a reader does not read ahead in the proposal operating with one set of definitions only to find out later that the author is using a different set. You see what they're saying here is that if you don't define for us from the beginning, and when this thing comes first, when it appears, then I will read and continue to think that this term means something else. But when I come to the end of your studies, I find you have defining it to mean something that I was not relating to. So there you have lost me, and you make me become reluctant to continue to read your report. So let us be cautious. When the term first appears, that is the most important area where we define it. Defining terms also adds precision to a scientific study. You see, with this need for precision, one finds terms stated early in the introduction to articles. In articles, they are telling you that you will find the terms defined early at the beginning. In dissertations and thesis proposals, terms are typically defined in a special section of the study. And I will show you, I've got examples where I've placed the definition of terms in terms of the types of the studies that are conducted. And we can engage on it and we can make comment on it. The rationale is that in formal research, students must be precise in how they use language and terms. They need to ground thoughts in authoritative definitions constitute good science. Colleagues, later on you will see that I will recommend here, based on these guidelines, that it is important to use definitions that are available from the literature, because literature provides standard definitions. A definition that is here in South Africa, you will go to Germany, you will find it within the same discipline. If botanists say that the marula plant is called Sclerocaria cafra in Latin name, when you go to Europe, you go to you go to America, you go to India, you go to everywhere, that scientific terminology is the same. So that is a standardization of the taxonomic system of classification. So it is also a terminology and a concept in a way. But here, also in ordinary language, we can define a term not in Latin using simple English, but that definition would be standardized and it should be taken as a scientific discipline, as a scientific definition within the same discipline. Then there are, here they're just showing you at the bottom of this slide that in every section where there are foreign terms, you must be able to define, and we will demonstrate it in the sections that are following here. Special terms that need to be defined appear in all three types of studies, such as qualitative, quantitative, and mixed methods. And remember, when we dealt with the research approach, we touched on these research approaches. So all of them do have terms that have to be defined in terms of the procedure and in terms of other concepts in the literature. And we start with qualitative studies. In qualitative studies, because of the inductive evolving methodological design, inquiries may define few terms. At the beginning, though they may advance tentative definition. I like a person who asked me a question on the literature map, whether the literature that I have used to build the literature map imaged after I collected data or during data analysis, or it was the initial literature. Now here, they're showing us that under qualitative studies, it is also possible that some definitions at the beginning will be tentative because they must evolve due to the inductive nature of the process in qualitative studies. So you can confirm the definitions or you can finalize them towards the end of the studies. Instead, themes or perspectives or dimensions may emerge through the data analysis. So when the themes are imaging, some concepts do image. So sometimes you need to define what that theme means or what that concept means as it comes from the your data. And that is where you then finalize the definition. Because at the beginning of the study, you would have provided and put tentative definitions. But as you go down, because more terminologies will emerge with the results and from the findings, then that is where you are required to finalize the definition of concepts. In the procedure section, authors define these terms in the procedure section as they surface during the process of research. And this means that if you are under the defining your research approach or your research design, your paradigm, your research methods, anything that you define under procedures, research methodologies, there are some important concepts that need to be defined. And we are encouraged to make sure that as we first introduce those terms and those concepts, we must define them so that we don't lose the research as we move together with them. Now, this is an example of defining concepts from the qualitative study. And here, it was one of the studies. It is entitled Establishment of the Catchment Management Agencies in South Africa and Organizational Design. And there were some examples that I cited from these studies on Tuesday. So in the literature section, I defined some of the terminologies, and this was in chapter 2. And in chapter 2, I still remember I was writing about the legislation about water and about the establishment of catchment management agencies. But there was the concept of organization that emerged there, that when it started to emerge under that chapter, I had to define. That is why you see this paragraph or this section entitled Defining the Concept of Organization. So I'm not going to read that one, but if you read that one, it says an organization is referred to as a group of whatever. It says further, an organization can be divided into several entities which have to function in a coordinated and cohesive way with each other to reach organizational objectives. The reason why I have these two types of definition is that there are two different authors that are defining the concept of organization. The other one is Sichoki in 2014. The other one is Galbraith in 2002. You see, so this is how the concepts are defined as they emerge. So there was no, in other words, this was not defined in a dedicated section. This definition. We will see if there was any other that had a specialized section where the definition was made. Oh yeah, the other one again is the organizational structure and design. Again, this was also from chapter 2 as it emerged. And when I came across the concept of the structure, organizational structure and design, I had to first define it so that the readers could understand what I'm talking about. The same applies to defining the concept of organizational theory. So this is just an example that these things have been done in other studies and that we can use it to improve the review of our literature. Definition of concept in qualitative studies still continues. So in chapter 1, there it is, you see, and this was in qualitative, colleagues, as it is said, It's not in quantitative or in mixed methods. So I've done it in chapter 1 and I've done it in chapter 2. So in chapter 1, you don't see a heading. You just find that it has been defined. And I see it in statement number 2. It says, although different authors define qualitative research from their own perspective, most of them depart from the same premise, thereby displaying a sense of convergence of their views. You see, this is my own statement. I'm introducing a definition. So in my own words, but then I quote Creswell, what he said. So if I go down, I have also quoted Denzin and Lincoln in 2000. So there are different ways of defining. The others ones from chapter 2 have got headings, subheadings, and this one does not have. It's just inside a paragraph. And this is in a procedural section. It is under the methodological section where we're talking procedures, where we're talking research methods, we're talking research design and research approach. So there, that is where I said we are advised to also define important concepts that are used under the methodological justification section. So here I'm just summarizing that the extract was from a specific study, and the concepts were defined in chapter 2. We have noted that only few concepts were defined at the beginning in chapter 1 and 2. In this study, there were no definitions that emerged during data collection. So it means a lot of the definition were based on the literature review, although there were few, there were not a lot of them. And there was no separate section for the definition of concept under these studies. But if we talk about quantitative studies, let me just see how much time we still have, colleagues, so that I must also be cautious. We are left with 11 minutes to the end of the study. As soon as I finish this section, I will pause and we will come to the end of the session today. In quantitative studies, operating more within the deductive model of fixed and set research objectives include extensive definitions early in the research proposal. You know, a deductive model allows you to put things up front, to put principles. That way you put your theories, you put your hypothesis for testing, and these things appear mainly at the beginning of the research, the studies. That is why even the definitions are elevated, they are put there at the beginning. Investigators may place them in separate sections and precisely define them. The researchers try to comprehensively define all relevant terms at the beginning of the studies and to use accepted definitions found in the literature. Then this is just an emphasis, because we said it is important to define that which, to use definitions that emerge, that come from the literature. But the mixed methods studies, there's a different way of doing it. Here, the approach to definitions might include a separate section in the study where it begins with a first phase of quantitative data collection. So you've got a number of designs under mixed method studies, or the mixed methods approach houses a number of designs. Those designs, the approach to literature review is different amongst all of them. So we have got what we refer to as sequential explanatory design. This is the design where you start collecting data, that quantitative data, and then followed by qualitative data to augment quantitative data. So here, even the use of terms, the definition of terms differs from other designs under the mixed study. Now here, we say if it is quantitative, then the priority is the definitions at the beginning. But if it begins with qualitative data collection, such as under the sequential exploratory design, where you start by exploring, then the terms may emerge during the research, and they are defined in the findings or results section of the final report. So that is where we said there's a possibility. You see, the approach is inductive in that things are not put up front, but things would emerge during the processing the study. And as you move towards the end, collecting data, that is where you finalize the definition of concepts. And I've said this earlier on in previous slides. But if both quantitative and qualitative data collection occurs at the same time, such as in embedded design and convergence parallel designs, then the priority given to one or the other will govern the approach for definition. For an example, if you put more emphasis on quantity, then the definitions are at the beginning. If you put more emphasis on the qualitative, and maybe you start with it, then your definitions then towards the end of your studies. However, in all mixed method studies, there are terms that may be unfamiliar to readers. For an example, the definition of mixed methods study in a procedural discussion, I've already said this, need to be defined. In other words, terminology under the methodological section need to be defined when they first appear. It is very, very important. Also, it is important to clarify terms related to the strategy of inquiry used, such as concurrent or sequential. And I've put those in brackets so that I can make reference to them. I've already said that. And the specific name for a strategy must also be defined so that you don't lose people that are reading, because not everybody understands your methods and your approach and your design that you are using. So it is important to familiarize them with what you are doing so that they can follow you when they are reading through your report. And this is an example for the definition of concepts in terms of the mixed methods. This was the study conducted in 1997, completed, and the graduation was in 2001 graduation. So the definitions had a specific section. And this is the role of Venda culture in nature conservation. That is where the literature map came from. So the definition of concepts, a separate section. So this is how it is. That's why you can see there is a heading, the definition of concepts, but you've got a number of concepts that are defined. And I only chose one, natural resources, as an example to show you that I have them from 141 to 146 or to 1410. I don't know how many they were. I just forgot, but this is a sample that I took and I used a snippet tool. That is why I didn't write here on the slides, but I copied and pasted it here so that it can make sense. And the method that was used here, a special section dedicated to the definition of concepts at the beginning, because it was an embedded mixed method design where data of qualitative and quantitative nature were all collected at the same time. It was embedded, you see, qualitative data embedded in quantitative data, or quantitative embedded in qualitative. The data were supporting each other. So they were collected at the same time with the same tool. So this is how the definition of concept were done. And I also, in terms of the procedures, this is where I was defining the research approach, the research process, where I tried to define the concept that relates to what I was doing. And I don't see where. Okay, there. Statement number 3 says, Fink describes face-to-face interviews as that part of the survey system which is mainly used for collecting information to describe, compare, or explain in knowledge, attitudes, practices, or behavior. That is a definition by Fink, 1995. So you see, here I've defined in the middle of the statement, and I did not have a subheading for the definition of concept, or I did not include this definition under the definition of concept, because here I was defining it under a different section. And this section is mainly dedicated for procedures, for the approach and for the process, for the methods, for the designs, and for the paradigms. So I defined it in the body, in the discussion, in the paragraph. Now, I'm concluding now this section on the definition of terms. While there is no one approach governing how one defines the terms in a study, but several suggestions follow. And these are, you need to define a term when it first appears. No, we've emphasized that. In the introduction, for an example, a term may require a definition to help the reader to understand the research problem and questions or hypotheses in the study. Third, write definitions at the specific operational or applied level. Operational definitions are written in specific language rather than abstract conceptual definitions. You must remember, there are definitions that pertain to the theory or at a very high level. But as you move on, you go to operational and to deeper discussions, which are no longer theoretical. Then you need to put operational definitions, and these should be available from literature. Since the definition section in a dissertation provides an opportunity for the author to be specific about the terms used in the study, a preference exists for operational definitions. Yes, it is correct. Do not define the terms in everyday language. Yes, instead, use definitions from literature. I might be saying this for the 6th time. In this way, the terms are grounded in the literature and not invented by the researcher himself. But it is also possible that the definition is not there, is not available. The term has not been defined by anybody, and you know that other people would not understand it. Then you can try to define it. And when you define it, you must be consistent and continue to use that definition throughout the study. And in the same way that you have defined it, so that you don't lose readers. Researchers might define terms so that they accomplish different goals. This one I want to skip. Yes. Typically, this separate section is not more than 2 to 3 pages. If you have got a dedicated section that talks to the definition. And here, I'm not going to deal deep with comparison and contrasting. I just want to finalize what I promised that I will do. And here I've taken a subheading that belongs to comparison and contrasting as interpretation and criticism. Always be as critical and goal-oriented as possible. This is when you are interpreting. It's either your literature or your finding. Avoid merely summarizing someone else's writing and inserting the odd comment. Oh yes, no, we are talking about literature review here. Don't just summarize what they're saying, because that is not interpretation and that is not criticism. You should continually question the work of others in view of your own findings and point of view. How do you see it? How do you think it? How do you interpret it? That is why we say, if somebody has written in his own language, how do you think it means it to you? What does it say? What did you have in mind before you could read this statement? Could you relate to it, or it is foreign, or it's just a surprise to you? Okay, you should provide clear and critical discussions substantiated by documented proof. Now, I've made an extract of some of the statements where I tried to compare. If I contrasted, it will become evident here, and I would pause when I finish here. In the past, this is from the study that I conducted. It is the role of Venda culture in nature conservation, the one where I presented a mind map or a literature map. I've got a statement in one of the paragraph or the section, which says, in the past, the Bavenda placed taboos on the killing of animals that were related to health hazards. Animals like crocodiles, for an example, and pythons could not be killed because it was believed their death caused influenza in the people in the area where these animals were killed. Now, listen to what I say now. There are other authors who said it differently, or who said certain statements in relation to this. And the first one is Jordan, who says, okay, I said, this view is slightly different from those of Jordan, who states that according to the Venda culture, pythons could not be killed during rainy seasons. Do you hear? This one is talking about killing pythons during rainy seasons, because if we kill them, it would cause the rains to stay away. You see? But the first statement, it says people will be affected by diseases, influenza will come. This one says the rain will stop stop coming. And the other one, who is Farvarmelo, says the Bavenda did not kill snakes because they were regarded as vazimu. You see, the other one said they were regarded as vazimu. The other one says the rain will stay away, but the other one says they will be influenza if you kill them. Now, let me analyze for you. Now, I said, however, these 2 points of views are only indicative of different angles from which Venda culture promotes the conservation of pythons. I don't want to go further. I just want to tell you what I imply by this. I'm saying, having heard of all those people, although they have said a statement that relates to the killing of pythons, the idea is pythons should not be killed. All of them are saying pythons should not be killed. But the other one says it is because of influenza. I don't care whether they are talking about influenza. And I don't care whether they're talking about vazimu. And I don't care about if they're talking about the rain that stays away. I'm interested. Can they protect the pythons? Can they protect the snakes? And what does the culture indeed prohibit or instruct them to behave in another way from their cultural perspective, that they eventually do not kill it? Because I am a conservator. I'm not a meteorologist who is interested on the rain, and I'm not a doctor who is interested on influenza, which is common flu. And I'm not a one who believes on pythons as vazimu, because I don't worship them, because vazimu is goddess. So I don't worship animals, I worship the living God. So it is not my interest, and my topic is not about that. My topic is about conservation. It's from the three authors, or from the three people, contribute to conservation. So that is how I could compare, or I can analyze, or I can contradict. And particularly, now my finding is that they all support my intent, my topic, my interest, my research. So this is the example that I have. But if it is not clear, we can continue to have it in future so that we can make it even more clear.